All right, so here, in fact, is a question for your short paper 8. Why is the testimony of some people given more weight when a jury considers the facts of a case? Give your opinion supported by fact and evidence about whether this practice is morally and ethically good or bad. Okay? Like we said, in the Sawyer brothers, 8 witnesses, 1 witness. 1 trumps 8. We've seen this type of thing before many, many times. How about this? I'm thinking about the Duke rape case. Now, this woman says, they raped me. Okay? Now, what happens is, of course, this woman's testimony was absolutely and utterly discredited. She had sex with 2 different men on the way to this party. Oh, that's irrelevant. That's absolutely not relevant to this thing. Discredited her. However, number 2, she had a prior history of false accusations of rape. This was something that had happened 5 years prior. Well, okay. Maybe all of a sudden there's something to it. Maybe there's, but, and this is an incredibly important part, it is not the experts, the scientists that are doing this. It is the jurors that have no idea what the hell they're doing. If somebody's up on the stand, the other opposing lawyer is going to be like, yeah, Ms. Jones, what was the mental hospital like 20 years ago when you were in there? Oh, shit. Ms. Jones is no longer a credible witness because she was in the mental hospital 20 years ago. What? The judge is going to say, strike that from the, jury, ignore that information. A, the jury doesn't ignore that. B, that witness's testimony is garbage now, okay? Doesn't matter. That's all that, that's all that lawyer had to do was introduce that piece of information. And if you don't have that juicy bit of gossip, you'll find another one. It's not tricky to do so. Clearly, if I was to be brought in to be witness to give eyewitness testimony in something, I guarantee you, the lawyer that was working with me, the one that wanted me up there, would introduce me as Dr. Brown. Absolutely and utterly irrelevant. The fact that I'm a doctor is not relevant to my ability to be an eyewitness. It has no relation. But the jury is going to hear that word doctor and is going to see, oh, that's impressive. And that's going to somehow add to the credibility of my... It's irrelevant, okay? So sometimes this is bullshit, right? 8 versus 1. But at the same time, Sandy and Lonnie Lawyer's 8 witnesses, like we said, 4 witnesses are his drinking buddies sitting at home with him, right? Of course, his 4 drinking buddies are going to say and stick together. Of course, the friends are going to stick together. Of course, the spouses are going to stick together. Is it ethical to say your spouse doesn't count as your witness for you? I guess. I mean, it makes sense. It doesn't seem fair to me, but it makes sense, okay? It's up to you to really get into this one, okay? All right. So now, as we said, the main job of a trial lawyer is to get the jury to like the defendant. All right, that's it. Here we go. And so I asked the jury, is that the face of a mass murderer? He's pretty cute. Okay. Turns out that a witness that speaks more confidently is much more influential to the jury. I mean, you want to know how you become a good professor? You don't have to know shit. You just got to pretend you know things, all right? You just got to be confident. If you act confident, then you will sound like you know what you're doing. I do usually know what I'm doing, but sometimes I nip the edge a little bit. Attractive defendants get lower penalties. This is crazy. We were talking about serious misdemeanors, minor and moderate misdemeanors, and they looked at how attractive the defendants were in these cases. And it turned out, especially for the serious misdemeanors, unattractive people had a bail of about $1,400, whereas attractive people had a bail of about $500. All right? For the same, I mean, granted, they did this across many, many crimes and many, many things, but look at that. Attractive people just get better treatment, okay? Oh, yes, and defendants that are similar to the jury get better treatment, which is why the lawyers work really hard. That's why, in fact, during the O.J. Simpson trial, there was an awful lot of pretrial issues with getting a jury in place because there was too many white people on the jury, according to these people. And I mean, there's some truth to it, okay? That had the makeup, the racial composition of the jury, and the racial composition, well, the race of the defendant have a relation to each other. I already said that. Okay. Jurors can't ignore. I already said that. Pretrial publicity is also impossible. First impressions are so important. I mean, this is it. If you're a boy and you just happen to have to go into a court of law and you wear an earring generally, take the damn earring out. Because if that's the first thing that the jury or the lawyers or the jury or the judge sees, they're going to have a negative opinion of you. And it takes like 50 positive pieces of information to wipe out one bad first impression. I mean, really, if you have one bad first impression, you usually don't have enough opportunities to get rid of it. It's just there forever. Characteristics of the victim. Oh, this is interesting. Jurors tend to be less sympathetic when the victim. See, here was, maybe you guys, again, you guys are too young. Bernie Goetz was huge in the 80s. In the 1980s, New York City was just a cesspool of crime. It was just bad. You know, I get angry myself when I go down to the local park and I have these kids are like these tough teenagers are running around with their pit bulls unleashed and stuff, and I get angry because it's like I'm paying the property tax on that park, and you're telling me I can't take my kids and play at that park. That's basically what you've done. You've stolen that park from me. Well, this is what New York City was about. You couldn't walk down the street without fear of getting shot or stabbed. You couldn't. I mean, I know this. I remember I got in the New York subway in the early 90s, and I was with a native New Yorker, and he says, okay, here's a rule before we get on. You sit down, you look at the floor, you do not look at anybody in the eye, because you look at them in the eye, you're just asking for trouble. They're going to come over, they're going to give you trouble. You just look at the floor, and of course, give you trouble is always it's a stereotype, but I can tell you exactly what that person looks like, okay? And so what happened was Bernie Goetz, he had gotten mugged a couple weeks earlier, and he was really pissed. He gets a gun, he gets on the subway, and he has got a bone to pick, man. He is pissed. He's like, these young thugs have stolen my ability to just live a normal life. I can't even sit on the subway without fear of getting mugged or stabbed or something. So he gets on, and he starts making eye contact with the biggest, baddest guys on there. And sure enough, that's what happens. I mean, you make eye contact with these guys, and they come up, and they start, what's up? What's your problem? Give me your wallet, Bernie Goetz goes, yeah, you want my wallet? Bang! And he shoots him, all right? And now all of a sudden, he's this giant hero. He's the criminal, right? Because he shot him, but all of a sudden, he was a hero. When the jury brought Bernie Goetz up on this charge, they were just like, you're kidding, right? There is no way I'm putting this guy in jail for that crime. There is no possible. He is a freaking hero. Somebody finally stood up to the thugs. So what happened? The victim was seen as a bad person, and therefore the criminal was not seen as a bad guy. Okay? And there was something to that, too. I'm a big fan of that. So there's a lot of it. I want you to read some of these. These are very interesting. These I pulled off. There are actual comments that people wrote after the Goetz. It's very, very good stuff. Read those. It's good. It's a good history lesson, if nothing else. People don't understand what the lawyers tell them. Yeah. This is very, very important. I think we had said it at one point. The more confident, we did with the case of Joseph Kidd. Even though people get more and more confident, they don't get more correct. I don't have it all here, but when people say, I'm 99% certain I'm correct, they're correct about 85% of the time. When people say, I'm 95% certain, they're only correct about 72% of the time. I mean, these are not good numbers. And so meanwhile, a jury is told, you must prove guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't know what beyond a reasonable doubt is because they don't quantify that for you. They just leave that hanging out there. But if you're 95% certain, that sounds like it crosses the threshold for beyond a reasonable doubt. And if that jury is anything like the real world, it turns out that, as I said, 95% confident means 72% correct. Does that mean 28% of the time you're sending the wrong guy to jail? That's basically what it implies, okay? And yet you cross that threshold for beyond a reasonable doubt. Of course, these lawyers use jury selection. That was a fun movie. If anybody watched The Runaway Jury, that was worth watching. Here, group polarization. Remember polarization, where people get together at the beginning of deliberation. At the end of the trial, the jury goes back into a room and they ask them, and this is basically 10% were undecided, 10% thought it was not guilty, 30% said I think it's manslaughter, etc. You see, they're across the board. But then after they deliberate, look at this. They cluster together and ding, they clustered their responses. They started out across the board. They ended up clustering. So that group polarization we talked about in many, many different situations occurs in this situation as well. Yeah, it is better the 10 guilty men. Okay. It turns out that as a general speaking rule, this is group decision making. Sometimes when a group gets together to make decisions, is a group of 12 people better at making decisions than the 12 individuals alone would be? Yes and no. It turns out that the average of the 12 individuals will be worse than the 12 working together. However, the best individual out of those 12 will far exceed what the group of 12 does together, and that's true of any decision making. We're done with this chapter. We got just one left to go, so let's just stick it out and get this class done.